Hi there. As part of my Lost Darling Harbour series, which began with me covering the brief but eventful history of SeaWorld Sydney, the next portion of Darling Harbour that has been lost to time that I would like to cover is the Darling Harbour Monorail, an ambitious yet controversial transport system that never realised its ambitions, and slowly declined until it was finally ripped down. In this video, I'll be covering the history of the Sydney Monorail and why it closed down, touching upon local industry and politics. In the early 1980s, Darling Harbour was not like it is today, as in that period, Darling Harbour was nothing more than a collection of old warehouses and derelict rail yards that were used for decades, as opposed to the tourist development we see today. However, in an inquiry into the New South Wales transport industry carried out in the late 1970s, it was found that this centre was inefficient, should be moved, and the land used for public purposes. It was not until 1984 when anything regarding Darling Harbour would be heard from again, as the Premier of New South Wales, Neville Wran, announced the government's decision to redevelop Darling Harbour and return it to the people of Sydney, in time for Australia's 1988 bicentennial celebrations. There were two main tenets of the redevelopment of Darling Harbour: the Sydney Convention Centre and the Harbourside Shopping Centre. As part of this development, the state government intended to build a transport link from Darling Harbour to the Sydney Central Business District, a transport link that they found to be of significant importance to the Darling Harbour development. The government looked into many transport options, including a light rail system, which would have reduced ticket prices by half, but required street space, and a monorail system, a system viewed at the time as futuristic. Sydney City Council preferred the light rail line. However, in November 1985, Transport Minister Laurie Brereton announced a monorail would be built, the TNT Harbour Link, operated by Australian transport company TNT. As part of the development, the Sydney Monorail's loop circuit would be 3.6 kilometres long, designed and constructed by Swiss company Von Roll, who had previously built a monorail system at Sentosa Highlands, Singapore, Alton Towers in England, and SeaWorld in Gold Coast, Australia, as well as numerous cable cars installed in different places around the world. Sydney's monorail was touted by Von Roll as the world's first automated transport system, as the original intention for the system was for it to operate automatically without using drivers. As the monorail was a one-way loop circuit, it compromised its effectiveness, with Kim Pedersen of the Monorail Society stating that its design limited its usefulness as a people mover. Over the next 2 years, the monorail would slowly take shape, transforming the landscape of the city. To avoid congestion, much of the work for the monorail was completed at night, with long sections of track having to be carefully transported in night hours on Sydney's Warringah Freeway. With the exception of the monorail cars, all the monorail system was built in Australia to comply with local content rules. Sometime in 1987, 6 monorail trains, consisting of 7 cars, were delivered to the monorail's maintenance facility in Pyrmont, built to Von Roll's Type 3 specification. Each seated 48 passengers, with a driver in the leading car, and were designed to seat 56, using all 7 carriages. The first train was displayed at the Trans Public Show in Geneva, Switzerland in May 1987. During this period, there was heavy political debate during construction of the monorail system, with future Sydney Lord Mayor Clover Moore quoting,
"The monorail is the most offensive structure to assault our city since the Carl Expressway curtained off Sydney Harbour."
Nonetheless, work on the monorail continued. In October 1987, the TNT Harbour Link's first test services ran on a 500-metre section at Darling Harbour. By the end of the year, much of the track had been completed. Ultimately, Australia's bicentennial year in 1988 had come, and Queen Elizabeth II formally opened Darling Harbour on 4th May 1988. Sydney Aquarium and Harbourside Shopping Centre were the first attractions to open, and was soon followed by the Sydney Convention Centre. 2 months later, the TNT Harbour Link opened, on the 21st of July 1988, by TNT's chairman Fred Miller. Needless to say, the plaque that you just saw did not age very well. That day, the monorail gave its first services to regular passengers. Among the first to ride the monorail was TNT's CEO, Sir Peter Abels. At the opening ceremony, the Premier at the time, Nick Greiner, was absent for unknown reasons. Initially, the monorail ran on stringent regulations, as people poorly dressed or with a minor cold were barred from using the system.
Well, certainly, that would be the case, yes. I mean, we'd be happy to call an ambulance or some sort of transport, maybe to get them to their home quickly. I don't think that we'd be wanting to take the monorail anyway.
The TNT Harbour Link had a capacity between 5,000 and 8,000 people per hour. Each station stop took 40 seconds, including the time to decelerate, board passengers, and accelerate again. In a testament to its design, a complete circuit of the route took just 12 minutes.
The monorail trains ran on rubber tyres, and each 7-car train had 6 37 kilowatt electric motors, permitting a normal operating speed of 33 kilometers an hour. The doors of each car were automatic, and the floor level was self-adjusting via an automatic suspension system. To get on the monorail, a passenger had to pay a steep $5, which allowed them to go one loop on the monorail, and were given a token which they inserted into the turnstiles. I happen to own one of these tokens, by the way. Never at any stage of the monorail's life was the ticketing system in line with the rest of Sydney's transport. Later on in its life, the monorail had proprietary NFC cards, but considering how the monorail never ran off Opal cards at any stage, they were useless when compared to the rest of Sydney's transport. One of the most iconic sections of the monorail was the section when it ran across the Pyrmont Bridge linking Conkle Bay to the nearby Pyrmont, between the Harbourside and Darling Park stations. Many of the photos and videos of the monorail show it running between the flags on the Pyrmont Bridge. The system was specifically designed to operate normally when the bridge rotated. During its lifetime, there were 8 stations in operation on the monorail's route. Each of these stations, with the exception of 3, featured Von Roll's signature cylindrical station design, common to many Von Roll systems at the time, including the former Merry Hill monorail in the UK. These were, in order: Harbourside, one of the 3 main Darling Harbour stations. The station was affixed to the Harbourside shopping centre. Convention, another of the Darling Harbour stations. This station served the original Sydney Convention and Exhibition Centre. Paddy's Market, located adjacent to the former Sydney Entertainment Centre. This station was originally named Haymarket, then it was changed to Powerhouse Museum, and finally Paddy's Markets. The station served the Powerhouse Museum, Market City, and the Sydney Entertainment Centre.
Chinatown. This station was originally intended to open as Darling Walk and later Gardenside. However, did not open until years after the monorail initially opened, due to low patronage. It eventually opened in October 2001 as Garden Plaza. The station served Sydney's Chinatown. The station closed in 2004, but reopened 2 years later as Chinatown, and by 2012 the station was unmanned and only opened between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning on weekdays. At some point before the closure, Chinatown station was closed down permanently.
World Square, a station that served the World Square development in Sydney CBD. World Square had a temporary station in operation until 2005, when the station was rebuilt and incorporated into the adjacent World Tower building. As such, the World Square station was one of only 2 stations to not have the cylindrical design of the original monorail stations. Gallerias Victoria, originally named Park Plaza and in planning Town Hall. Until 2000, there was a temporary entrance to the station, when the station was integrated into the new Citigroup Centre structure. The original plan was for the station to link to the Town Hall railway station, however, this never happened. City Centre. This station opened in 1989, replacing a temporary station that was suspended above Pitt Street. It was located in the City Centre shopping arcade. Darling Park, the final Darling Harbour station. This station did not open until around 1992, years after the monorail originally opened. Initially, this station was to be named Casino to serve Sydney's planned casino development, originally intended to be one of Donald Trump's casinos. However, the proposal was rejected, with declassified police documents accusing him of having links to the mafia. Ultimately, the casino development was scrapped and moved to Pyrmont, where the Star resides today. On the site of where the Darling Harbour Casino was to stand, Cockle Bay Wharf was built instead. It can also be argued that Darling Park Station served the nearby King Street Wharves and the Sydney Aquarium.
While the monorail opened to much fanfare, it soon became plagued with problems. Remember how I said the original intention was for the monorail to operate automatically? Well, just 2 months after opening, the automated system was plagued with problems and frequent breakdowns. resulting in TNT making the decision to convert the monorail to manual operation through the use of drivers. The computer-controlled driverless system would not be used again in the monorail's lifetime. To make matters worse, on the 28th of July, 1988, an electrical fault caused the system to stop operating. 50 passengers were stranded in carriages for 2 hours between 3:50 and 5:50 p.m. TNT was criticised for failing to call emergency services until 5:40. By the time the fire brigade arrived at the scene, the passengers were en route to disembarking at a station. The system was troubled with low patronage just 2 years after opening, after the 2 weeks free rides period came to a close. TNT anticipated the monorail to carry 12 million passengers a year. However, in the 2 years after opening, about half that was being achieved. At no point during the monorail's life did patronage ever reach that expected target. Due to the low patronage, the planned casino and Darling Walk stations were not built until 1992 and 2001 respectively. Another problem facing the embattled system was the lack of development around the area that it was focusing on. Darling Harbour had failed to develop and flourish as planned, and nothing would be built in Darling Harbour until 1997. Other areas that would have drawn passengers, such as World Square, remained construction sites for years. Another accident occurred in July 1992, when monorail services were suspended due to a fire in a wool store building which caused a wall to collapse within meters of TNT Harbour Link's central control room offices. But despite this, there were achievements. Within a few years, the monorail started to turn an operating profit, even if it was never going to pay to cover its construction costs. The TNT Harbour Link would be the first mode of transport in Sydney to use a smart card for paying transport fares. It wouldn't be until 20 years later, in 2015, when the Opal card was spread across the city, that the rest of Sydney's transport would run on smart cards. Around 1993, for the first time in its history, the carriages of the monorail began to ditch the TNT orange striped livery, and instead for the first time had advertising on the cars. This was a perfect marketing opportunity for businesses. After all, what company wouldn't want their brand advertised on a train system that moved through major streets in the CBD with thousands of pedestrians potentially seeing the monorail cars with their brand name on it each day? Everybody jumped in on the craze. Pepsi, IGA, Fujifilm, heck, even Darling Harbour attractions such as the Star, Sydney Aquarium, and even SeaWorld advertised on the monorail. The advertising will continue for the rest of its lifetime. In August 1998, TNT sold the monorail to Metro Transport Sydney, who operated the Sydney light rail system that opened the year before, where the TNT Harbour Link was renamed the Metro Monorail. This was done after TNT was taken over in 1996 by the Dutch Post and Telecommunications Company, PTT Nederland, after TNT experienced many years of financial struggles. The decision was made by the new Dutch board to sell off all of TNT's assets unrelated to post or logistics, including its stake in Ansett, Australia's second largest airline. TNT still exists today, but it is no longer an Australian company, it is Dutch. With TNT now out of the picture, Metro Transport Sydney repainted the monorail carriages into an all-white livery with monorail.com.au written on the bottom of the carriages. The monorail was remarketed from the serious transport system of the TNT era into nothing more than a tourist gimmick, ditching its final remnants of the urban mass transport system that it was supposed to be. To an extent, it worked. By the 2000 Olympics, the monorail was used by mostly tourists drawn to Sydney, with patronage just above 2 million, a far cry from TNT's lofty prediction of 12 million. Like the rest of Darling Harbour, the monorail benefited from the increased tourist intake to Sydney during the Olympics. Monorail patronage went up twofold during this period during the high tourist intake. The fact that some of the Olympics events were held at the Convention and Exhibition Centre meant that there was, for once, practical use of the monorail. During this period there was a song they played in the monorail called Do the Loop. I'll show you it now.
Put your left foot in, right one on the floor, let's have some fun.
Dad, watch the door!
Put your arm right up, put your nose against the window.
What's over there?
Do the loop, doop, doop, do the loop, doop, doop, do the loop and do the round.
Die ganze Luft auf dem Führung sofort aufhängen!
I really wonder why they didn't play this.
And I swear it's Springfield's only choice. Throw up your hands and raise your voice. Monorail. What's it called? Monorail. Once again.
Monorail. fast forward a few years to 2003, the monorail was once again struggling. In order to attract some more customers, Metro attempted to position the monorail as a retro experience to attract hipsters. Needless to say, this gimmick flopped. In its many years of operation, the Sydney Monorail broke down. A lot. One of its most notable accidents took place in February 2010, when two monorail trains collided at Darling Park Station, hospitalising 4 people, including a 3-year-old boy and a pregnant woman. After this accident, one of the monorail trains involved in the collision was withdrawn from service and never used again. In early 2012, the state government announced its intention to purchase Metro Transport Sydney for $18.6 million, where the Metro Monorail was rebranded to the Sydney Monorail. But almost immediately after, the state government announced that the monorail would close within 3 years and be removed for infrastructure developments in the CBD and Darling Harbour. All along, the state government's reason for purchasing Metro Transport was to extend the light rail system and demolish the monorail without the need to negotiate with the private owners. At the end of 2012, the monorail's closing date was confirmed to be the 30th of June 2013. The New South Wales Premier at the time, Barry O'Farrell, quoted that,
"The real problem with the monorail, I think, for most Sydney-siders is that it doesn't actually go anywhere that you want to go."
He commented that this decision paves the way for the development of a world-class Sydney International Convention, Exhibition and Entertainment Precinct, as the New South Wales government gets on with the job of making New South Wales #1 again. By the way, this isn't the last we're hearing from him or his friends over at Lend-Lease. In the monorail's final months, some of the trains were painted in a special Farewell Sydney livery. Special commemorative merchandise was also sold at the monorail stations. The Sydney Monorail's final ride took place at 9:30 p.m. on the 30th of June 2013, and in order to be on that final ride was through a ballot system. Around 40 people chosen through this way were the lucky ones to experience a historic occasion. Following this final ride, the monorail's official website on the domain monorail.com.au was taken down. When the monorail was closed to the public, it was just 21 days shy of celebrating its 25th birthday. After that final ride, the Sydney Monorail was left completely abandoned. But not for long. Immediately after the closure, the state government commenced work on demolishing the monorail system. The removal of the columns and beams took around 6 months, until demolition was complete in early 2014. However, remnants of the monorail were still left standing. As of me making this video, 5 of the Sydney Monorail's former stations are still standing: Darling Park, Harbourside, City Centre, Chinatown and World Square. These are among the only traces of the monorail left in Sydney. Most of the stations are locked and boarded up, where there are small holes in the wall to peek through. When you look through them, it looks like a time capsule from 2013. I contacted each of the companies responsible for the upkeep of the stations to grant me permission to film the abandoned monorail stations, and each of them granted my request. The Darling Park station I did not require permission to film, as the government recently renounced its ownership of the station. At the Harbourside station, when you peek through the holes, the original advertising is still there, along with a no drink or food on monorail sign on the opposite end of the station, alongside the original turnstiles. The Darling Park station, on the other hand, has no holes to peek through, and you can't see the inside of the station. However, it is possible to see inside from different angles. In the case of the Chinatown station, for many years there was a monorail station sign outside of the building. Unfortunately, I was informed that the sign was replaced in January of 2018 with a generic store sign. The station, unlike the others, is not boarded up with a black wall, as the entrance to the monorail station is still there. However, the turnstiles and cash booth are gone. The city centre station's giant hole, which the monorail track would have exited through, is still present. When you peek through the holes, the Farewell Sydney Monorail sign is still there, alongside the original turnstiles. Unfortunately, this station was the only one which I was unable to get footage for, as I contacted the owners of City Centre Shopping Arcade to get permission to film footage, who denied my request. Nonetheless, I visited the site for observational purposes. When you look behind the new convention centre, it is still possible to see the former maintenance depot for the monorail system. However, it is now used as supports for the convention centre and as a storage area for the Dulwich Hill light rail line. The World Square station is completely blocked off with a concrete wall. It is impossible to see through, and you can only see the station from the outside. 3 of the monorail stations have been demolished so far: Paddy's Markets, Convention and Galleries Victoria. Paddy's Market station was left abandoned for a number of years following the closure. However, as there was a nearby structure to the former Sydney Entertainment Centre, it was demolished alongside the entertainment centre throughout 2016 to make way for the Darling Square residential development, which is still under construction as of me making this video. The convention station did not stand abandoned for long. Unlike Paddy's Markets and the other stations, as 6 months after closure, the former monorail station was demolished alongside the old convention centre in early 2014. This particular section of the monorail that travelled along the back of the convention centre was among the reasons it closed down to make way for the expanded ICC Sydney. The Galleria's Victoria station, unlike any of the other stations, had its owner go out of its way to demolish the station. It is unknown when this station was demolished as I cannot find any dates, but this is the one photo to prove that it was demolished. What happened to the other parts of the monorail? While most of the track was cut with blowtorches, around 10 metres of track and a set of carriages were preserved and donated to the Powerhouse Museum. 2 monorail carriages were converted into meeting offices, used in Google's Australian offices in Pyrmont. The rest of the track wasn't so lucky, however. Most of the track was removed and recycled. Somehow the track managed to be used in the construction of a temporary road bridge, built as part of the Sydney Metro project. This bridge was removed at some point in 2017, with the monorail track pieces removed along with it. What happened to the track pieces after that bridge was removed still remains to be seen. The remainder of the monorail carriages were moved to a workshop yard in nearby St. Peters by Metropolitan Demolitions, who had the contract to demolish the monorail. The carriages were put on Gumtree and sold at $3,000 a piece. Of the 22 sold on Gumtree, 10 of them were shipped to Taiwan, where they are owned by an Australian expat living in Taipei, and the rest were sold to private owners. Thankfully, none of the Sydney monorail carriages were destroyed. Why did it close? First of all, the monorail was built by Von Roll. When you look at this company's track record, you'll understand that the monorails Von Roll had built were not designed for urban mass transport. TNT had the potential to build a useful monorail by building a two-way system. However, Von Roll were inexperienced with this, and instead used a one-way loop system that failed its primary job, to get people to where they want to go. By the end, the monorail was simply a tourist attraction, and there were very few people who used it to get to work. The Sydney monorail went to nowhere by the end. In the early years of the monorail, all 3 of the city stations on the monorail remained construction sites. While City Centre was fully complete by 1990, Galleria's Victoria was not built until 2000, and World Square was not fully completed until the monorail's twilight years. Other stations such as Casino went to nowhere because the development that it was to serve was never built. Other stations, such as Darling Walk, opened years after the developments they intended to serve went bust. You get it? The Sydney monorail went to nowhere. The construction of the light rail line in 1997 further sealed the monorail's fate. 3 stops on the light rail system were common to the monorail system: Convention and Paddy's Markets, with another station at the actual Sydney casino, The Star, and another station, Pyrmont Bay, which currently serves Harbourside, a former station on the monorail by the way. The second reason why it closed was in order to expand the Sydney Convention Centre. At the time of the system's retirement, the old Sydney Convention Centre was on the brink of replacement. The monorail snaked around the back of the old building. In order to build an expanded convention and exhibition centre, this track needed to be removed. When the system was first built, many people, mostly the NIMBY type, labelled it the Monster Rail, claiming that it was an eyesore with an intrusive track system going down narrow city streets. While I can agree with them, the form of transport that they prefer, light rail, looks much worse with all the poles and wires around George Street than a skinny little monorail system. To each their own, they say. The Sydney monorail is used by monorail detractors such as Clover Moore as the cautionary tale of why not to build a monorail. But we should keep in mind that TNT tried to install a monorail that was previously only used in theme parks and leisure areas. It was never designed for urban mass transport. Furthermore, by the time of the monorail's closure, Darling Harbour was aged, and the stations which the monorail served were primarily tourist attractions, many of which were built in the period between 1988 and 1997. As opposed to commuter stations such as Wynyard and Town Hall, TNT even briefly considered extending the monorail to as far as Circular Quay. Why they didn't remains a mystery. The main takeaway from the Sydney monorail for state politicians is to never build a monorail in Sydney again, and I can agree with this. I don't think a monorail will ever be built in Sydney again. Ron Ward, the general manager of the TNT Harbour, said that the monorail was an interesting experiment but not a raging success, concluding that monorails, they are a kind of entertainment. However, in a testament to monorail's success, many monorail systems built as urban transport still exist to this day. Maglev systems in China and Japan, which are built as monorails, operate successfully and remain operational to this day. Other monorail systems in Tokyo, Seoul, Mexico City, and Las Vegas are still in operation, running with high patronage. On the flip side, Sydney is one of the few cities in the world to have built completely new light rail infrastructure in the 21st century. And there you have it, the Sydney Monorail, once considered the transport of the future, a controversial system for all of its life, in a twist of irony was killed off and replaced by the trams of yesteryear, after a long period of slow decline. It was the first piece of the original Darling Harbour that was lost to time. Hey guys, for those of you that are unaware, I am continuing on the Lost Darling Harbour series. If you are new to this channel and missed out on the last episode, click on the link in the video or in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like, and if you want to see more, press that subscribe button down below. Thanks. This ride was common in larger Sega arcades at the time. However, no Sega